Several members of parliament elect from the opposition party were arrested on 15 July 2014. They were speedily arrested for incitement and insurrection. In contrast, no investigation has been launched today to identify those security guards who were seen beating demonstrators. The MPs were subsequently released as soon as a political agreement was reached, leading to speculation that the two events were linked. Land activists are taken to court all over the country. On 10 November 2014, 7 women from Bangkok Lake were arrested for protesting in front of Phnom Penh Municipal Hall. Their homes were flooded, and when they protested, they were arrested and prosecuted. They were tried and convicted within 1 day. I went to the Court of Appeal yesterday to attend their appeal hearing. I very much hope that these women and their co-defendants will receive fair treatment from the legal system. These cases are symptomatic of how the courts are being used for political ends. The courts are also being used to protect the economic interests of the rich and powerful. For instance, Lai Surya Kheng and his family have endured years of threats, attacks and imprisonment, including having a bag of venomous cobras thrown into their house. Despite several complaints filed before courts, no action has been taken against the perpetrators. By contrast, Lai and his family have been arrested following complaints by the company pressuring him to sell his land. His 23-year-old daughter remains in prison today. Any arrest or detention is punishment for the legitimate exercise of rights is guaranteed by international human rights law, including the freedom of assembly, of association and of expression. Actually, the right to participate in political life is arbitrary. I cannot stress enough that the rule of law requires accountability. It requires courts to deliver justice and to do so independently of any external influence. It would be a disservice to the Cambodian judiciary to focus only on improving its efficiency when the damage to its credibility comes from more fundamental problems. The way to remedy this would be to ensure that all court decisions are based on material evidence and sound legal reasoning, taken by judges who have no ties, personal, financial or other, to the executive or to either party in the cases they adjudicate. The lack of effective judicial remedies has had a tragic impact on the nation's poorest, dispossessed, marginalized, and those belonging to minority and indigenous groups. None more so than those driven off their homes and lands. For a number of historical and other reasons, issues associated with land rights have been and remain the #1 human rights issue in the country. When I assumed this position, I was concerned by the impact of economic land concessions on human rights. I was pleased that the week I began my mission in the country, in May 2012, focusing on economic land concessions, the government issued a new decree imposing a moratorium on new concessions and promising a review of the existing ones, both being measures which I had recommended. Efforts to formalize the land rights of the rural poor through systematic land registration and the land titling campaign under Directive 01 are commendable. However, the reality is that these efforts continue to exclude contested plots of land where land disputes rage. The number of land disputes and families affected by them reportedly rose sharply in 2014. A great number of long-standing disputes also remain unresolved, many dating back nearly a decade. I have been overwhelmed this week and during my last few visits with petitions from communities who have filed claims to the courts, the cadastral commissions, the parliamentary human rights commissions, and the National Authority for Land Dispute Resolution, and who have been consistently denied access to justice. This includes indigenous communities from across the country, many of whom have approached me for support during all my missions. The lack of progress in protecting the land rights of indigenous Binong communities in Busra, Mandulkari province, for example, and the unbridled instances of land grabbing in areas of formerly inhabited by these and other communities threatens to wipe out entire indigenous cultures. The exploitation of the nation's natural resources, its arable land, forests and rivers seem to be benefiting the few and not the many. Private companies cleared contested land, burned down homes, and engaged in illegal logging with immunity from prosecution. Those brave enough to stand up and report on such matters are prosecuted by the very same courts which should be protecting their land and housing rights. The government must step up its efforts to exercise proper oversight of business enterprises developing land or to provide redress for harm done by these private companies. On Wednesday, I again visited the Boraikela site where families continue to live in conditions that are simply unacceptable in the 21st century. And in the capital of a country boasting such strong economic growth. When speaking with representatives of the Cambodian Chamber of Commerce this week, I outlined my concern and underscored the fact that I, and I believe all Cambodians, recognize the need for more energy for homes and businesses. I am pleased that we readily agreed that such a need should be met through a participatory process of proper consultation, compensation, and voluntary resettlement. Standards of free, prior, and informed consent must be rigorously applied when consulting with communities, including indigenous peoples. That includes for projects of national importance, such as the construction of hydropower dams. No one should be pushed into extreme poverty because of national energy needs. I am concerned that the management and ongoing review of economic and other land concessions continues to suffer from a lack of transparency, accountability, independent monitoring, or public scrutiny. Land grabbing and the lack of legal remedies available to victims of such violations continue to undermine the development of Cambodia. I am convinced that this issue, more than any other, erodes public trust and confidence in both the judiciary and the government as a whole. Land conflicts will persist unless an independent, competent and trusted institution, either the judiciary or a reformed National Authority for Land Dispute Resolution, is able to deal with complaints effectively and fairly. With the public confidence so low in the judiciary and in the existing state institutions, for the reasons outlined above, my view is that a number of independent institutions with specific mandates could help fill the gap. I believe firmly that in a nation like Cambodia, where so many government agencies have judicial or quasi-judicial powers to arrest people, and where evidence is so easily disregarded by courts of law, such oversight will prove invaluable in preventing abuse of authority. It will be effective and credible, however, only if it is guaranteed full independence from the forces that it is mandated to monitor. In light of the apparent lack of investigations into police actions that exceed the standard norms, including into last year's shootings and many other incidents that have come to my attention, the establishment of an independent police complaints commission would be helpful to restore public trust in the police. Where traditional accountability mechanisms are ineffective, external civilian oversight can help to fill the gaps. In some countries, such as external civilian oversight, civilian oversight is exercised through an independent national human rights institution. In others, the mechanism may take the form of an independent police complaints commission. Such a body could receive complaints about police abuse, investigate those complaints, refer cases to the courts where appropriate, impose disciplinary measures, and propose reforms of the police services. One of the most significant new institutions established in Cambodia is the Anti-Corruption Unit, known as ACU. Its creation was followed by several important initiatives, such as the drive to eliminate ghost public servants from the state payroll and payment of civil servant salaries through bank transfers, which I am confident will bring enormous benefit if implemented correctly. However, the movement of funds remains difficult to trace. Widespread corruption has been well documented, and despite the existence of anti-corruption legislation, it remains the greatest obstacle to the achievement of the inclusive growth that the Cambodian people are demanding. From the experiences of many countries which have successfully reduced corruption, independence is a key feature of effective anti-corruption bodies. The United Nations Convention Against Corruption, to which Cambodia is a party, requires states to establish an anti-corruption body with the necessary independence to prevent and combat corruption without being influenced by politicians or other authorities. I regret to say that the governmental anti-corruption unit of Cambodia does not meet this requirement. It will avoid accusations of bias and politicization unless measures are taken now to rectify its status. Cambodia was a pioneer in the region when it decided to ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment or punishment in 2007. The optional protocol requires the establishment of an independent national preventative mechanism known as NPM. An independent NPM would conduct regular visits to all places of detention, including police stations where allegations of ill treatment remain too frequent. So far, the government has established an intergovernmental mechanism which calls itself an NPM. I underscore in the strongest terms that a victim of torture cannot plausibly be expected to seek justice from the very institution that allowed him or her to be tortured in the first place. I encourage the government to fulfill its voluntarily accepted legal obligation to establish an independent NPM and to seek technical assistance from the subcommittee on the prevention of torture and the OSHR in doing so. Independent national institutions that conform to the Paris principles, that monitor and advise the government on all human rights matters, and are empowered to investigate individual complaints, have proven to be an effective protection mechanism in many countries. Given the failure today of the parliament to effectively represent its people and the judiciary in delivering justice, there currently seems to be a need for such a mechanism, whether it is to protect the rights of women, persons with disabilities, or other vulnerable groups. The preferred approach of the government has been to establish governmental rather than independent bodies. The Cambodian Human Rights Committee, which reports to the Council of Ministers, is one of them. As useful and necessary as such bodies are, they do not take the place of independent institutions, since they cannot perform the essential checks and balance function. I was therefore pleased to learn in the course of this mission that the efforts to draft the new law on the establishment of a National Human Rights Commission are being renewed once more. While I do not rush to welcome such initiatives prematurely, I will encourage all those involved to work together collaboratively for the good of the country. There are many issues such as xenophobia and racism, LGBTI rights, and disability rights, which do not receive sufficient attention from the existing state institutions that would benefit from continuous monitoring and policy recommendations by an independent national human rights institution. To conclude, the past 6 years have gone by very quickly for me. That I will be completing my mandate by becoming the longest serving special rapporteur for the country gives me a sense of both personal and professional satisfaction. The reform agenda is being ironed out, and both the majority and the minority parties have made a public commitment to carry out electoral reforms. It is time to look at the whole system of governance more comprehensively. It has often taken a long time to implement the decisions and packages of reform. I hope this time there will be no excuses, one after another, to delay the implementation of the agreed package of political reform and derail the process of dialogue and reform currently underway in the country. Cambodia is a forward-looking country. Starting from the Paris Peace Conference, the country has made huge strides, including economic development, underpinned by political stability. As the country began to accelerate its economic growth, this has brought its own challenges of inequitable development and a widening gap between the rich and poor. Major political developments have taken place from which I believe there is no turning back. The progress recently made seems to have instilled hope and confidence in the people, especially the youth in the country, for the future of democracy and human rights. The major difference between then and now rests in the people. They are no longer afraid to speak out. People know their rights and are ready to claim them. Nothing speaks better to Cambodia's maturing democracy than this. While there is still a considerable way to go towards realizing the vision of a liberal democracy and the objectives set out in the Paris Peace Agreements of 1991, which heralded a new democratic dawn for the country, I conclude my final mission with full confidence that Cambodia will get there. Its vibrant people will ensure it. It has been an honor and a privilege to have been able to make a contribution to the strengthening of the rule of law, democracy and human rights in the country at this historical juncture. With the assurance that I will remain forever a friend of Cambodia, I wish the people of Cambodia all the best in accomplishing these objectives and building a more prosperous, tolerant, cohesive, equitable and fairer society for all in the years to come. And thank you for your attention.